Hi, I'm David Valdez, and I teach AP Human Geography at Cherry Creek High School in Greenwood Village, Colorado. Today's video is going to discuss how advances in communication technology have facilitated devolution, supranationalism, and democratization. What will we learn? Well, here's a reminder. Devolution is the process by which a country government cedes power to a subnational group or area, or when an area breaks away and forms a new state. Examples include things like the United Kingdom letting Wales and Scotland have greater autonomy in their own affairs, the United States establishing autonomous Native American reservations, and the break of Yugoslavia into 7 different states. Advances in communication have facilitated devolutionary actions. The internet is used often to disseminate the beliefs of devolutionary groups, which allows them to attract new members that they would not have reached before and to communicate their aims with the outside world. Social media is used to help groups organize protests and communicate quickly during the protests. We saw this during the Arab Spring as protesters were able to organize quickly and deorganize their protests when officials came in. Videos that are taken by protesters can show abuses by government forces to gain sympathy for the protesters. Supranationalism is when several countries form an organization to achieve common goals and benefits for all the countries that are involved. These organizations are often political, military, economic, or environmental. Examples of these supranationalist organizations include the United Nations, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the European Union, the Paris Climate Accords. Advances in communication have facilitated supranationalism. Communication technologies connect people and countries faster across time and space. Communication technologies can efficiently link countries involved in military alliances. And communication technologies link the markets and banks of economic alliances. All of these things are part of the time space compression that occurs because of advancements in technology. Advancements in communication have facilitated democratization. Communication technologies bring outside information to people who live in autocratic countries. That means countries that have been trying to keep information from the people who live in there are finding it tougher as the communication technologies get better and people can bypass the systems set up by the government to keep them from knowing what's going on in the world. Communication technologies make it easier for groups to send information as well as to get support from outside forces. Let's practice. New communication technology has made it easier and faster for groups around the world to communicate. This concept is known as B. Time-space compression. What should we take away? Well, communication technology has changed global politics. Communication technologies have facilitated faster communications between groups, and communication technologies have spread information to formerly unreachable groups. So it is your job as a geography to understand how these new technologies compress time and space and create new global networks. Thank you. Hi, I'm David Valdez, and I teach AP Human Geography at Cherry Creek High School in Greenwood Village, Colorado. Today's video will discuss how global efforts to address transnational and environmental challenges and to create economies of scale, trade agreements, and military alliances help further supranationalism. What will we learn? Well, a reminder on supranationalism. Supranationalism is when several countries form an organization to achieve common goals that benefit all of the countries. These organizations are political, military, economic, and environmental. So, our examples include things like the United Nations, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the European Union, and the Paris Climate Accords. Countries often join together to cooperate economically. Countries work together to achieve economies of scale. Countries working together have a common set of regulations and laws and lower tariffs when they work and lower tariffs than when they work alone. Countries working together can trade more freely both within their trade zone and outside of their trade zone. And countries working together can specialize in certain sectors of the economy, such as manufacturing, technology, or natural resources. Countries often join together to cooperate militarily. These countries work together to protect themselves and their allies. So their strong alliances make it less likely that they will be attacked by other countries and more likely that they will receive help when at war or if they get attacked. Military alliances also share technology, training, and bases. With environmental supranationalisms, countries often join together to cooperate on many different environmental issues. This is because a lot of our environmental issues transcend political borders, and so it will affect more than one country at a time. Countries often work together to set limits for air pollution or water pollution or land pollution as well. Countries work together to protect animal species from being over-harvested and endangered, such as fish in the ocean or even endangered species in places like Africa. Countries work together to manage local environmental issues complicated by political borders. Countries that join supranationalist organizations may have to cede some sovereignty to the organization, which means that in a case like the European Union, a lot of the members have given up control of their own currency and monetary policy to participate in the Eurozone, where everybody uses the same money. In the military realm, Article 5 of the NATO Charter says an attack on one is an attack on all. This means if a NATO country is attacked by an outside force, all of the NATO countries must contribute to their defense if they're asked. And countries that signed the Kyoto Protocol actually had to agree to binding limits on greenhouse gas emissions. Let's practice. Which of the following events could be a threat to a state's sovereignty at a national scale while holding a region together at the global scale? A. A natural disaster like an earthquake or tsunami occurring within the country. B. A member of the state's minority party being elected to lead the country. C. Admittance into a supranational organization such as the European Union. D. Decommitment to environmental resolutions established by the United Nations. Or E. A shift from a federal system to a unitary system of governance within the state. The answer is C. Admittance into a supranational organization such as the European Union. When countries join a supranational organization, they must sometimes give up some of their sovereignty to be a part of the larger regional organization. What should we take away? Well, supranationalist organizations require give and take. So countries cooperate with one another politically, economically, socially, militarily, and environmentally through a variety of supranationalist organizations. In order to meet the goals of the organizations, countries must sometimes give up a little bit of their sovereignty to the greater organization. It is your job as a geographer to understand the advantages and disadvantages to joining supranationalist organizations. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Ms. Patel, coming to you from Silver Spring, Maryland, and today we will continue talking about topic 4.10, consequences of centrifugal and centripetal forces. More specifically, we will be learning about the centripetal forces today. So, just like centrifugal forces, we have to first define centripetal forces. So this is when there's a force that's binding the country together. So just picture this animation to your right as we go through this. So this might be something like having a strong national government, a shared history, a common language or religion, or just having a place that is very economically developed. There could also be some kind of terrorist attack or a war, and everyone's uniting against an external threat or enemy. These centripetal forces can lead to many things, including ethno-nationalism, more equitable infrastructural development, and increased cultural cohesion. So let's go into each of these by looking at an example. First, we have ethno-nationalism. Now, this one can be a little tough because depending on how you're defining it, it might appear to be a centrifugal force. But as an effect of a centripetal force, it would often be that there's some kind of national identity being based on a common ethnicity or some kind of attempt to tie ethnicity and nationality. One current example could be in India, where the government is very actively trying to make a Hindu ethno-nationalist identity. Another effect of centripetal forces could be more equitable infrastructure development. So a more united country will often lead to more equitable economic development that's more spread out throughout the country, such as making sure there's enough transportation infrastructure for everyone to get where they need to go, or spreading out the development between urban and rural areas. It can also lead to increased cultural cohesion. Now, this could just be because there is a shared history, a shared culture, but it could also be that there's a good transportation system, a unifying leader, a good economy that brings together a multicultural society for increased cultural cohesion. So let's practice each of these with some FRQs to see what we know. So both of these FRQs will be the same ones you saw in the last video on 410, but we're going to finish off the centripetal part of the question. So we will be focusing on part B. Real quick though, in part A, you have to define centripetal and centrifugal force. So just to make sure we're good here, you would explain something about centripetal force being a force that pulls a country together or unites a country. And then for part B, just like in we had to do for the centrifugal force in part C, we have to pick a specific example in this map and explain a centripetal force that affects the viability of that state. So there's a lot of valid answers here according to the rubric, and I'm just going to go over a couple of them. You can pause your video if you'd like to go through everything, but for our purposes, one that we're going to explain is religion. Religion is a unifying force in a lot of countries in South Asia because the way the country lines were partitioned was partially based on religion. So Hinduism is a unifying force in India. Islam is a unifying force in Pakistan, for example. Another thing that could be a centripetal force is the expressions of national pride or nationalism, such as cheering for your cricket team in India or Pakistan. That could be a big centripetal force. And one more is a unification against an external threat. So with the idea that there's a lot of tension between Pakistan and India, that causes India to kind of unify around going against Pakistan and vice versa with Pakistan and going against India. Another FRQ is the same one we looked at last video, but this time we're going to focus on part A, where they ask you to use contemporary examples to explain how each of the following have contributed to the development of a national identity and the strengthening of a state, as in sort of centripetal forces. So for number one, they want you to explain a country that has been given more economic development and how that helps strengthen the state. all of these were valid countries on the rubric. So we could explain how any one of these places has increased its economic development and that has improved and strengthened the country. In part two, they're very specific with a relocation of a state's capital since 1950. All of these, Brazil, Nigeria, and Pakistan, are valid answers, but Brazil's the easiest one to explain. So Brazil's government moved their state capital, Brasilia, relatively recently in the last few decades in order to accommodate more of the country. So they moved it to a place that's pretty central to the country, and that was partially to acknowledge the existence of so many indigenous groups in the northern Amazon area and to push some development northward. So that kind of strengthens the state, or that was at least the goal. So what should we take away from all of this? Centripetal forces are forces that unite places. So remember, scale is always important, where there could be different centripetal forces at different scales. These centripetal forces can lead to many things, including ethno-nationalism, more equitable infrastructure development, and increased cultural cohesion. Always be good at knowing examples of each or being able to explain one of these centripetal forces or what it can lead to. And the difference between centrifugal and centripetal is very important. And I don't know about you, but my students always have issues with this. So we've come up with an acronym to help us. If we think of centrifugal and the F and the A in centrifugal is falls apart, and centripetal, the P and the T is pulls together. So that's kind of how we can distinguish those to help us remember the difference. It has been a pleasure doing these videos with you, and I hope that you remember to every single day, always remember to go out and find the good in the world, and thank you for listening.